Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Buckeye fans of all ages, the Ohio Podcast proudly brings to you the Buckeye Lounge. I'm your host, the Schrock Star Sean Schrock. Of course, my co-host, the Wolverine Slayer herself, TG. Tonight, guys, we have a very special guest. It's an honor to have a Buckeye legend in the house tonight, Mr. Robert Smith. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean and TG. Great to be here.
Uh, just want to get your take on the Buckeyes, college football, and maybe hear a few stories of yours from your playing days. So, um, how do you feel after the season? How did you feel the first year of the 12-team playoff went?
I thought it was unbelievable. I mean, not just because it ended up so well for Ohio State, but I was more one of those traditionalist kind of guys. I like the old system, and it's interesting. Ohio State has won both of the moves to the playoffs. Versus the move to the 14 playoff after the four team playoff change in 14, and now the full 12-team playoff. I thought it ended up great. It brought a lot more excitement to the game, and ultimately, it's more money for the players, and that's great. We're going to see where all this stuff settles out. I think the Title IX challenge to the NCAA settlement is an interesting part of this, but yeah, it was. I thought it was great the way that they handled it, and I thought that it was as exciting as everybody that wanted a 12-team playoff would have thought it would have been.
Do you think they should keep it at 12, or do you think they should? I mean, there's talks going to 16. I mean, I think it'd be more watered down with the larger groups that they get, but I mean, that's just my opinion. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's unusual for them to stay where they are, right? I don't know how long this current deal is, but what we've seen time and time again in the past is that once they get to one playoff format, they move to the next. Now, I think 16 is probably the last stop, but I think they'll go to 16 eventually.
What do you think of the format they're trying to use in the 16-team playoff with the three at large bids, the auto bids for the SEC and the Big Ten, where they each get four teams, and then obviously the ACC and the Big 12 get two, and then you have three at large bids at that, and also the playing game type structure. How do you feel about that?
Honestly, I haven't even looked at all of the different scenarios that they have for the 16-team playoff. So I really can't make an educated statement on it. They'll get to a system that makes sense. I think it's been an interesting evolution, but it's certainly not going to stop.
Oh, that's great. Okay. I do want to ask this: how did you feel about the Buckeyes' run? Just from like a perspective of how did you feel about their run? How they responded from the loss to Scum and able to bounce back in that playoff run. How do you feel about that?
Well, and then the loss to Oregon earlier in the year. I mean, I just thought it was an incredible run, and honestly, it reminds me a lot, of that run in 2014. Obviously, losing the game early, and then having QB go down, CJ coming in. It was amazing, kind of how that run worked, and I think it was a similar type run. Every team has its own personality, but I think there was a lot to be borrowed from what happened in 2014, even though Ryan Day wasn't around for that one. So it was amazing, and it's really cool, as a former Ohio State player. It stays inside of you, and I think more so than probably for some of the young guys that end up playing at three or four schools. We all made a decision to go to a school, and most of us stayed there. So when you see that team succeed, and more importantly, I think because when you know the game so well and you know how difficult it is to win any game, let alone go through an entire season, you know the adversity you face. You know what it's like to be in a locker room where everybody has to rally behind each other. So to see a story like that end with Ohio State hoisting a trophy just doesn't get any better than that.
Now, when you played, how many teams do you think Coach Coop in his era would have had in the playoff. You know, I think at least 3 or 4 would have had a shot at national championship.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I know that that Rose Bowl team '97 was pretty good. Uh, that was actually the only Rose Bowl game that I went to, so I was able to see that one in person with the win over Jake the Snake Plummer.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I probably would have got a few of those teams in there. Um, but it's water under the bridge, right?
Sure.
Like,
Hmm.
I'm just so happy for the guys now and the things that they get. A lot of funny stories from my time. I remember we had uh, the game tickets, and we would give game tickets to family. But on the back of the game tickets was a free Wendy's burger, so we would go and collect, all the game tickets after the game, so that we could get
Free
free
burgers.
Wendy's. And it's funny, like people say about me, like, "Oh yeah, I'm sure you took a pay cut when you went from Ohio State into the NFL." And I kid you not, I got my first car 5 months before I got drafted, and it broke down 3 months before I got drafted. So, I was one of those guys that followed the rules. Maybe bent one here or there with a free pizza or something like that. But yeah, we struggled, and it was worth it to us. It makes some great stories, but again, it's all about the guys today, and for me, I'm just really happy to see those guys get the money that they deserve.
What is your view on the transfer portal?
They got to do something, and it's interesting. I think we've talked about this a lot. I've worked with the NFL Players Union in some capacity for 31 years now, which just sounds crazy to say.
Wow.
So I started off as a player rep, and of course, my first year in the NFL, 1993, it was the first year of free agency. So before that, there was Plan B free agency, and years before that, there was nothing, no movement. You got one team that you can negotiate with throughout your career. And I think what you've seen in the NFL, is certainly transferred over to college, and it's made things crazy. What you don't have, which I think you need, is some sort of collective bargaining agreement that, quite frankly, has some limitations on the players and player movement. If you're going to have the contracts have to have some meat to them. There have to be real penalties when the contracts are violated. Either way, and you just can't afford to do it. And I just think it escalates things so quickly. In the NFL, when you've got a salary cap that's set as a percentage of gross revenue, mostly TV and ticket revenue, it's easy to see, okay, well, that's where that money's going to come from. So if you're going to support the other sports, the non-revenue sports in college, it's impossible to do something like that unless you just carve out a smaller percentage.
Mhm.
But you have to have some consequences for people leaving. It's craziness right now the way that it is with the transfer portal.
Okay. I'm gonna actually ask you a question from our friend Eric, who's the College Huddle, also member of the OHR podcast. He says, "What's your favorite John Cooper story?"
Wow, that's a great question. Um,
I was wondering the same thing, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna have to think on that for a second. I've never been asked that question. Um,
Thanks, Eric, for stealing that one.
what's that?
I was thanking Eric for taking that one because that one I was actually gonna end up asking you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess, boy, no, I'm gonna have to think about that one. There isn't one story that stands out. I mean, I just love the way Coop would always have like his his 10 things that you need to do to win games. Um, and what stood out to me, I mean, he was one of the coaches. I mean, the truth of it is, Coach Cooper wasn't an in the trenches kind of coach. He liked to let his coaches coach, uh, but he just always had a great sense of humor. And you just remember, you know, uh, he would come with that southern accent, and it was always just run, run, just go run. That's what you got to do. You got to go run. So just kind of his inflection and his personality was always great.
That's amazing. And thank you, Steely, for stealing the other one I was thinking about, which is, and I'm asking anyway, what is your most memorable game as a player?
Oh wow. I guess I got to say the first one probably, just because it's the first time that you're playing in college football. It was against Texas Tech, and I didn't start the game, didn't really play much in the first half, just returned a couple of kicks. And I'm at halftime. I'm down in Gatorade and not thinking I'm going to be playing that much in the second half. And like you're in there, right? And it was the first of what would become kind of a calling card moment for me. Uh, we had this long drive, go down, and I remember Greg Fry pitches the option and scored. On that north end zone, and on the close side, and I was so excited, and the Gatorade made a reappearance, shall we say, on the sideline. So, and it was national TV, and there were as many people reaching out to me about seeing me kind of shout at my shoes, lose my lunch, whatever you want to call it, on the sideline as there were saying, "Wow, great game." But then after the game, like it's just craziness, and I really wish that everybody that was a fan of the game, had an opportunity, especially at Ohio State, uh, getting into the stadium and seeing it for the first time. When you're 18 years old and you're going out to play your very first game, and you have all the pregame hype, and that there's that build of the adrenaline, but to actually enter that stadium when everybody's just losing their damn minds, it's an unbelievable feeling, and it was just a true honor to play on that field that so many players over the years had played for so long, and then after the game, seeing President Gee, who had just become the president of the university, and shaking his hand, it was like a Hollywood script that was really corny, uh, but it ended up being real life, and just an unbelievable experience.
Now, Robert, you played high school football at Euclid. You're the only person that I know of right now that's won the Mr. Football two
No,
times.
somebody else won it twice.
Oh, did
Somebody
they?
else,
Oh, okay.
yeah. We'll have
Really?
to TG. Maybe you can look that one up. Someone else won it twice. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I didn't know about that.
Well, and here's the other thing, not to take anything away from my own accomplishments, but I was also the first person that had a chance to win it twice,
Oh, okay.
uh, because I was only the second winner of it, and I
Oh,
won and
Oh
I
wow.
won it and I won it as a junior. So
okay.
Buster Howe won it when I was a sophomore. He ends up going to Ohio State, and then I won it my junior year and senior year. So no longer the only two-time Mr. Football, and I was the first person that had a chance.
I did not know that. That's awesome. That's good
That
stuff
is,
there.
that's amazing. I'm
Now,
gonna look that up after the show.
a friend of mine who's usually in the chat, his name's Aaron. He pointed out a good point to me because he mentioned about how many people in your area where you went to school at played Division I football and how much talent. I mean, Cleveland's always had great talent up there, but Elvis Gerbach, Desmond Howard, you. I mean, there was so many people that came out of that area. I mean, you guys had to have a pretty tough schedule just playing high school football.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So Elvis and I played for the same CYO, the Catholic Youth
Okay.
Organization football team, when I was in the sixth grade and he was in the eighth grade.
Okay.
And there was a weight limit of 145, and our team got challenged like 3 games into the year, and Elvis got kicked off the team because he was too heavy. So we lost. So we lost Elvis, and then St. Joe's, where Elvis and Desmond played, of course. Um, they played their home games at our stadium.
Okay.
So it was a huge rivalry each year when we would actually play each other. It was the St. Joe and Euclid, battle, right? And when I was a freshman, I went to the game, and there was a huge series of fights after the game, and so they canceled the game moving forward. I don't think they ended up playing that game, sometime in the last maybe 15 years or so. Um, but so when I was a sophomore, Elvis was on that team with Desmond, and then OJ McDuffie, myself, and Desmond were the three running backs going for the rushing title in the city of Cleveland at the
Wow.
time.
Wow.
But I never got a chance to play against Desmond and Elvis that year. We normally would have played, but I remember going up being a fanboy, because we would play on Friday nights and St. Joe would play on Saturday nights. So I remember going up to the stadium on Saturday night and watching St. Joe play and calling Desmond over, just introducing myself. He's like, I don't know who this kid is. But yeah, it was pretty cool. There was a lot of talent. I think we had, I don't know, maybe six guys on my team that ended up going Division One. But my senior year, that is. But when I was a sophomore and we lost in the playoffs to Youngstown Boardman, who ended up going to win state championship, they also beat St. Joe's that year. But we beat Ignatius that year, and then that loss against Boardman, I would only have four other losses throughout the rest of my 2 years in high school, and all four of them were to Ignatius because they would end up winning the state and mythical national championship my junior and senior year.
Yeah, they were. What a program he built there.
Chuck, Chuck
Chuck,
Kyle did it,
yeah,
man.
man,
Yeah, he just had a
amazing.
movie. I participated in a little movie they made about him not too long ago.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Really? That's great. Oh, Chris, our buddy Chris, another member of the OHR podcast. Thank you for the 5, my man. He wanted to ask you, what was your, Mr. Smith, what was your recruiting? What made you choose Ohio State over other programs during the recruiting process?
Yeah. So it's amazing, after all this time, just how these things stick out. I mean, there's just such powerful emotions attached to it. Um, so the first trip that I took was down to the University of Miami. And it was great. Tom Bank, who just had the field at Euclid named after him last year, was my coach. Just saw him last year, old Banco. Uh, Coach Bank sat me down really early, and he said, "Look, we're going to narrow this down to 5 schools right now, and we're going to tell everybody else thanks, but no thanks." And I really only had 4 schools, um, and it was University of Miami, USC, UCLA, and of course Ohio State. And Bo Schembechler was a coach at Michigan
Mhm.
at the time. Gary Moeller was the recruiting coordinator for the Cleveland area, and like I was so sick of seeing him. It was unbelievable. Like, no, I'm not going to Michigan. Like, I'm just not going. But
Mhm.
Bo Schembechler invited me up for an unofficial visit, and Tom Bank, you know, he sat me down and he said, "I don't care if you're not going to Michigan. You're going to see Bo Schembechler because Bo Schembechler asked to see you." So I went up there. I went up there and visited. I had a great time and everything like that. But it was an unofficial visit. So I only took those 4 official visits. USC really was a close second. I was either going to stay home or I was going to go really far away. And I just love the tradition of USC, even though at the time under Larry Smith, they had fallen down, fallen off a little bit. So USC was second. but for me, having the opportunity from my mother, Bobby DiGeronimo, I ended up working for him in Independence Excavating up there in Cleveland. Bobby would have an RV uh,
Okay.
group that would drive down to Columbus for the games. And so my mother was able to go see me play so
Nice.
much. It was just amazing to have that. And, for me, I'm just an Ohio guy. Um, you know, not just because I went there, because I, wear the shirts or whatever, but, just when you experience more things and when you go to more places, you just have a different feel in certain places. And I'm just an Ohio guy through and through. And so um, getting down there, feeling comfortable in Columbus, uh, big enough to study whatever you wanted, and we can talk about um, you know kind of what I learned there and kind of how it's transitioned into my company now. Um, One of the greatest educations in the world, and obviously, one of the greatest sports programs in the nation. So um, it was a pretty obvious choice for me. Like if you're gonna stay home, or you're gonna stay anywhere close to home, you got to be at Ohio State.
Okay. Steely also wanted to ask, do you remember Joe Pickens, the Saint Ignatius QB?
so Joe's one. So Joe's one of my best friends. Uh, uh, and what's funny, Joe was the quarterback for St. Ignatius, and we played the very first nationally televised high school game my senior year in 1989, and it was the only time in my career that I played on sport turf. So throughout my career, we played on the putt putt courses that you had in the NFL. Just the thin layer of carpet over the concrete. But anyhow, so there was a big buildup to the game before Ohio State, or excuse me, before St. Ignatius and Euclid. And interestingly enough, Ignatius, they're another blue and gold team, and our other big rival was Menor, which is like Ohio State colors. And then Euclid, we were Michigan colors. But anyway,
Ooh.
that's another story. But so Joe and I went out and we did this photo shoot when we were seniors in advance of the game. And they had us like holding the ball and staring at each other. I just remember, we were just busting out laughing, with all these pictures and stuff. Joe ends up going to Ohio State, very good friends, and he ended up transferring to Duke. So we were actually roommates my second year at Ohio State, and then he transferred to Duke, and that was the year I sat out of football. But then years later, Joe and I lived together for a time as well. As he was going through law school, he's an attorney now down there in Columbus, and I would still move back to Columbus, or I was staying in Columbus for a while. So Joe and I are still really good friends.
That's good. Before you do something, Sean, hold on. RDCB, thank you for gifting a membership in the chat, and congratulations, Dustin, on receiving it. And another one of ours, thank you, Larry Daniels, one for the super chat. He asks, how much fun was it playing in the league with and against former Buckeyes?
Yeah, yeah. More fun playing with them than against them.
Hmm.
um, Obviously, Chris Carter was already there when I got there, and then Big K, Corey Stringer. His first year at Ohio State was my last year at Ohio State, and then he ended up coming to Minnesota in '95, and so my last 6 years in the league, got a chance to play with Corey then as well. And we had other guys coming up there. It was just so cool. And Chris and I, it was so we would go back to Columbus in the offseason. I would, not Chris, but I would go back to Columbus and would train with Dave Kennedy, myself, Joey Galloway, Eddie George, Raymond Harris, Chris Spielman, Mike Vrabel. We just had an unbelievable group of guys that very competitive. and we would go back and we would train back there. And it was on that, after my freshman year, and they were talking about how the emphasis was changing on the name of the university. How it was going to be the Ohio State. They wanted it was the official name, and they were going to emphasize that. So Chris Carter and I, we started that by going when we had the Monday night football announcements, and we would say the Ohio State University, and that's how that whole thing got started.
That's awesome. No, I was just going to ask you, was there any temptation or anybody, like from Ignatius try to get you to transfer there when you're in high school?
No.
Yeah.
No, I had gone Catholic school for 4 years. That was enough for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and I nothing against the Catholic school experience. I just didn't want to be in a private school anymore. I love the public school experience. I want to go into public school, and there was a proud tradition at Euclid, and where I lived there, this area, for people that are from the Cleveland area, up in Georgetown, up off of Highland Road. Uh, PJ Allen, Sean Johnson were the running backs, like right before me. Still really good friends. I had a picture on Facebook. Derek Evans was another one of the running backs that I played with. Rashawn Williams, we had Patrice Ward. We had some unbelievable backs, but there was that tradition, a proud tradition, before I got there. And I remember Jim Rattay, who was the football coach at Euclid. He came to see because at the time Euclid had Euclid Central and Forest Park, the two rival schools, and we would come together and play at the high school. And I remember he came out and watched the game between Central and Forest Park because it was at Euclid. It was at Euclid High School. And I remember talking to him and about the proud tradition of the Euclid running backs. So there was no way I was going to go to a private school in high school.
Oh, there was also another guy from Euclid who came to Ohio State after you to carry on the tradition.
Pepe Pearson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. Oh yeah, that's right. One of the great running backs, of course. Oh.
Yeah, we
The
had Pepe Pearson, Rashawn Jernigan, Tony Fisher. Tony ended up playing in the league for a while. Tony's now the athletic director at Euclid. I was just texting with him last week.
Did he go to Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought.
that's great to hear. The Dudon man, one of our great friends over from our time with the Buckeye Boys over here at OHR Podcast. Thank you to the $10. He says, Robert, during your college career, who would you say hit you the hardest? Oh boy.
I just got hit again. It's bad. It was flashbacks. Good timing there. Honestly, and maybe this is why, it was the only time that I got a concussion. And I don't even remember who it was. And honestly, I'm going to say the only player that I can tell you by name that I remember playing against was, and geez, I can't remember you would probably know his first name, Zagonia, the defensive lineman for Purdue, because
Oh.
he ended up playing in the NFL as well. But he's the only name that I just didn't care. I didn't care who we were playing against. Like, it's us. Let's do our job. I didn't,
Sure.
as a coach later would say to me, they're just sticks with hats on them. Like, you learn some tendencies and things like that of what guys are doing, but ultimately it's about what we go out and do. So I don't really remember those guys, but it was an interesting story. It was my last year at Ohio State, and we were up there in East Lansing, and I remember, so Butler Benote during training camp, I think the year before, had a really bad concussion, and I was his roommate. And so, like, they told me to wake him up occasionally and to check on him and all this stuff. So, I was at least familiar with what happens with concussions. And this Michigan State game, I got popped my last year, and I got back to the huddle and just complete cloud, like something's wrong. And I left the huddle, went to the sideline, and I started practicing on the way to the sideline. I'm like, I know my name, I know what school I play for, I know what team I play for, I know what city we're in. And I get to the sideline, and John Lombardo, who was the team doctor at the time, he said, Robert, what play did you just run? I was like, I have no idea. And he's like, well, okay, well, if you can remember the name of the play, we'll talk about getting you back in the game. And honestly, I don't remember if I went back in the game. Different protocols back then. Nothing against, Dr. Lombardo, who's, has worked with the NFL's substance abuse program for years, and, the drug testing program. But it was just a different time, right? But that was the worst concussion that I ever had.
Man, that had to wow. That's the first concussion story I've heard where it was that kind of bad.
Well, but guys, I've seen guys get knocked out, right? I've seen guys laying on the field with their legs still running. You know what I mean? Like on their
Oh,
side. And I've never, fortunately, I've never seen one bad enough where they, get the arms locked out in that fencing position. Um, but obviously, the the identification, uh, the protocols that they put in place to get players out of the game, and then the way that they work players back, onto the field. It's obviously come a long way. Helmet technology has improved. We just know more about it now.
It's not like when back in the '90s when they'd give you the smelling salts, and if you could remember a few things, they just send you right back in there.
Absolutely.
yep. I want to ask, what got you in the football to begin with exactly?
So I was a track guy from the time I was a little kid. Um, I would play pickup football and things like that, but I just always loved running. I remember, uh, watching the best sprinters in the world. When I was little, and when I was 11 years old, it was the first time that I ran track uh, in an organized way. And the track coach's best friend was the football coach, and said, why don't you go try and play football too? I'm like, yeah, okay, why not? I had never really thought about it, to tell you the truth. And I remember getting to practice the first day. I can't remember if it was Elvis throwing me the ball, but they had me step on the side, and they had a quarterback come over and just throw me a few passes. And I don't remember specifically what happened. I just know that after that, he said, "Why don't you go play running back?" So it must not have gone very well. Uh, but yeah, so they put me at running back right away, and that's the position that I stayed at for the rest of my career.
What events did you run in track?
I was well,
Sprinter, of
throughout,
course.
yeah, in high school, I was 100, 200, 400, long
Okay.
jump sometimes. But then in college, I ran at Ohio State and ran the 200 and 400 and 4x4 relay. And we won the 4x400 national title like a month after I got drafted. It was a crazy month, right? Like you get drafted, go up to practice, sitting in my first, that was the same thing they have now. Like they have a mandatory mini camp. They can have one mandatory set of OTAs or whatever after the draft. And I'm sitting in the locker room. And I'm sitting next to Roger Craig, right? And I'm like, what is this? What's going on? And I go back to Columbus and finish the track season. And a month later, we win the national title, down in Louisiana, beating Baylor. Two Ohio kids, myself and Chris Nellums. Uh, we had uh, Anthony Payne from Louisiana, and then we had Rich Jones from New York. So two Ohio kids, uh, a a Kentucky kid, and a kid from New York beating all those Texas boys. We beat Baylor.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. Sean, you go ahead.
Now, what was the draft process like for you? Did you have any idea that did you know where you were going ahead of time, or was it still up in the air for you?
No idea really. We had heard some talk maybe about the Raiders, the Dolphins, or the Cowboys, and they were all picking like in the 10 to 16 range, I think, that year. Um, and after they didn't pick me, I turned the channel. Like it was like I went to like I went to Bob Evans that morning, could barely eat. I didn't want to be I didn't want anybody around me. I was just watching it from my apartment with my roommates. Um, and when I didn't get picked in that range, it's like I'm just going to turn a channel. I don't even want to think about it anymore. So I turned on Ren and Stimpy, and like any self-respecting college kid would do in 1993. Um, and Denny Green calls me up, and when I had considered transferring when I was a sophomore, when I didn't play football that year, I had gone out to visit USC again, but I also went to Stanford. And that's when I first met Denny and Ty Willingham, who was his running back coach. Um, and, I decided to return to Ohio State, play a year because, then you had to, you had to have 3 quarters at a school and a summer didn't count. So, you had to be basically a full year and it was too late to transfer and play the next year. And so I went back to Ohio State, played that last year, and Denny called me up on draft day, and he said, because it's funny. First, my agent, I got to tell that part of it. My agent Neil Cornrich, who's represented a lot of Ohio State players over the years, represented Vrabel, uh, Belichick, and uh, a lot of the guys. Um, he calls me up, and he's like, "Oh, if you're nervous, you should go take a shower, right? Do something to relax." So he thought it would be funny if I was in the shower when I got drafted. He knew I was going to get drafted. Um, and Denny was the next call, and Denny is on the other end of the line, and he says, "I let you get away once. I'm not going to let it happen again." So it was really cool. Just uh, you get drafted, you finally know where you're going to be spending, this next portion of your life, um, and get on a plane, uh, and it's amazing. Back in the Northwest Airlines days, I had a nonstop to Minneapolis. I only had one flight. My favorite artist of all time, Prince. There are a lot of cool things about going up and playing in the purple and gold.
And that's
What was it like?
awesome.
What was it like playing in that Metrodome and that turf?
Well, people will talk about how hard the turf was, but the good thing about that turf is it's just a really consistent surface and it was a really fast surface. And if you're not a big running back, you better be a fast running back or a shifty running back. And so for me, it was perfect, right? So as abrasive as it was, I got my elbow. I had a number of elbow surgeries because I would get bursitis in my elbows, just falling on the turf. But it made for some really cool pictures on my football cards because my elbows were always bleeding. So I'd always have some blood on my pants. So I look like a tough guy all the time on my football cards because a lot of them I've got, you know, blood on my pants. Not that anybody needed to know it was my own and it was from my elbows, but it looked cool.
Oh, that's great. We have a couple more questions in the chat. Chris asked if you could replay just one game in the Scarlet and Gray, what would it be and why? And then
Wow.
Steely Matt also asked, did you ever play defense in high school? And Aaron's got a question for you, but I'm gonna save that because that's kind of funny.
Okay. Um, so the first which game would I change? I mean, I would have to say that it would be one of the Michigan games, just because I never won a game against Michigan. I only played in two of them, and both of them were in Columbus. Um, so if there was one game, I mean, either one of those two games, um, it's part of the reason why I go to Ohio State. And to be 1-1 in those games, they say that regret for the things that you do, is tempered with time, gets better with time. But regret for the things that you failed to do is inconsolable, right? And I'll never get a chance to go back and play one of those games. It would have been nice to win a bowl game because we were 0-2 in the bowl games that I played, but if it was one game, it would definitely be one of those Michigan games. And yeah, I played defensive back in high school,
Cool.
but I didn't play it in every game. Mostly just the big games that I would play defensive back. So that was it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So now Aaron's question was, and this was kind of
Oh,
funny.
I said Anthony Payne. It's Aaron Payne, by the way.
Okay. Okay. This
Hopefully
one's
it's not Aaron. Hopefully it's not Aaron Payne asking the question.
no, no, it's a friend of ours named Aaron. He asks, do you remember a play where you ran over a Mayfield Wildcat D tackle, put your foot in his chest and told him, I see you in the end zone? Like, do you remember that play at all?
See, there may be a bit of embellishment there. Uh, I mean, putting my chest on a Mayfield player, that probably happened, running him over. But I have never tried to taunt a defensive player. Like I never thought it made sense. At least not like that. I remember somebody chasing me one time, and I was like, "Yeah, come on, come get me." But that's just. But there's only. But I'm gonna excuse myself for that one because I can't remember his first name. His last name is Alvis. One of my good friends in high school, her name is Sherry Alvis. And Sherry said, because the word had got around, and she came to me during the week, and she's like, "Yeah." She said the Ignatius guys saying they got something for you, right? And so it was a punt return, and I'm running up the sideline, and this Albus kid is chasing me down, and he's behind me, and I'm looking back. I'm like, come on, bring it then. But that was the only time that I directly taunted a defensive player.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is because Aaron said his coworker is the one who told him that story that you did do that, and I found out. Okay, I gotta ask. Tyler, I'm gonna save that question for later that you have because we're gonna bring that up. Who was it? Okay, Grandpa Buck asks, "Who is your favorite Buckeye player of all time?"
My favorite Buckeye player?
Hmm.
Oh, that's a really tough question to answer. Um, huh. I mean, I guess I mean I'd have to say Raymond Harris, honestly.
Ooh.
Like Raymond's my guy, and I was it's funny, and like maybe Scotty would be mad, Scotty Graham, uh, because Scotty coaches for Washington now. He's a running back coach for Washington with Fish, and Raymond was out there with his son at a baseball game a couple nights ago. It was Saturday night because he was going to the game the next day for Father's Day. Uh, but he called me up, and Raymond was with him. So Raymond and I, like, he was a redshirt freshman when I was a true freshman, um, and just we've always been tight over the years. He ended up playing for the Bears, and obviously being on the Vikings. And I think my second year in the league, was when he was a rookie and we were both on special teams. I remember I was on the kickoff and he was on the kickoff return team, and we'd just run down the field and just, kind of smack each other a little bit on the field, talking a little bit, But but yeah, I mean, as far as a player, and Quiet Storm, badass ankles, still out there running, but just who he is as a person. I just every time I see him, it takes me back. Just a lot of great memories. But yeah, man, Raymond's still my guy.
I actually talked to him about coming on the show, and he told me to get a hold of him in July that he was busy, but you want to come
Okay.
on. So
uh, okay, so Sean, I'm gonna let you say Tyler's question because we knew it was only gonna be a matter of time before somebody brought it up.
Robert, since you brought up Michigan, what was your thoughts on what sanctions as a former player? What do you think we should get?
you knew it was gonna come up at some
Yeah,
point.
So this is Tyler.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So my daughter's name is Tyler. I don't think it's her. Um, honestly, I don't know what precedent you compare it to.
There is
So
none.
so it's hard for me to say. Um, I know that a lot of people will say, well, if you compare it to Jim Tressel and the tattoos and playing, ineligible players, I think a big part of that was, lying to the NCAA during the investigation. I know people look, emotions get tied up in these things, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but I don't know enough about the comparisons um, to say the what the punishments should be. Like, do I think they should lose a national championship over it? I don't think so. But I'm sure that there are some people that would argue against it and probably have good arguments for it. But we got our national championship the next year. Sun's going to rise tomorrow. And you know what? I'd rather be a former Buckeye 0-1-1 against Michigan than Michigan, uh, you know, than try and chase Michigan to strip a title because of a cheating scandal.
To be honest, I think I'm gonna say this. The If you compare it to the tattoo thing, it's a gajillion times worse because of it affected on the field results and led
Yeah,
to like them winning or losing the game, which is why everybody believes they should be strict because it's like you never won it fair, and then it turns out you never even stopped even after you got caught. So that's why everybody would say that.
but then
And
what we lost to them after they got exposed, though, right?
Yeah, we did.
yeah, that's the thing though, is the NCAA actually found out they still had people's signs and signals even after they got caught. It's just that because Connor
Well, but
Stallions is their guy, but it's like you were a good team. I will admit that you are a good team. But when
Mhm.
that little thing kind of comes out, it almost makes you question. It's like, do y'all not know how to stop doing stuff without getting like you gotta keep getting caught, and then not only that, but you get the sheets from Connor Stallions anyway, even after he leaves. That's why some people say that. I'm not saying like again, do I think they could have been a good team? Sure, but then when you have this kind of stuff that comes out, you just never know. Because with tattoos, it never affect whether or not you won or lost on the field, and it
Yep.
didn't affect recruiting either. Okay, these are players who are already on the team that were doing their own thing, and we look at it today's day and age, and we laugh at it because these guys were selling their own property to get tattoos and in their money to go pay for their stuff. Whereas this was like affecting directly on the field results and recruiting. Because without that, your recruiting don't take off whatsoever. You don't win games. If anything, Harbaugh probably gets fired. I'm just saying. I'm not. I'm. I'm just saying that. Like, because that's why people think twice about it. Because it's like y'all just
Yeah.
don't know when to stop.
Again, I knew that there would be arguments, very rational, reasonable arguments that would disprove, you know, my my attitude or my thoughts of leniency, or at least not having a
Oh,
title
on
strip.
top of the fact that they were completely uncooperative and were giving the NCAA the double bird. So, like, congratulations, you really ticked them off.
Robert, was there? I Our friend Vader wanted me to ask you this question. Was there a certain running back that you modeled your game after that you looked up to that you tried to run like, or because you had a
No, no, I don't think you ever really try and run like other people. I mean, the comparisons are made, and
okay,
actually, Raymond was the one. When I was a freshman, I was number 32, and they talked about me running like OJ, so he nicknamed me Juice, which is the nickname that stuck with me, to this day. Um, but I love watching OJ run. I love watching Gale Sayers. I love watching Eric Dickerson run. Love Franco Harris. But when you go out and play, you just play the game,
right,
and you react and you do what you do. Um, I think it's the bottom line is you need to just go and be your own person and player. So I never tried to model myself after them. It's just that I think the running styles were somewhat similar.
Okay. Tyler, he asked another question in the chat, and he says, "What wisdom would you give to today's current players?" And y'all being so funny in the chat right now with with Chris and them, like y'all so funny.
Yeah, that's it. So It's the same thing you always do, right? I think it's that you just work on your craft, and it's funny, going back to my high school days, and in track running against Chris Nell, and Chris won the state title in the 400 times.
Wow.
And Chris, he held the national. He might still have it. I've seen a couple of different things online, but he set the national high school record for 110 hurdles. Uh, back then, if it got broken, it would have been broken sometime like in the last 5 years. So the record was almost 40 years old. Um, and I remember running and thinking the two fastest guys, like in the history of the state up until a couple of years ago, are in the same year. And like, I never have a state title in the 400. And I remember, coming close and thinking, someone might be better than you, but you can never let people outwork you. And if you approach everything that you do that way, whether it's football or, in the classroom, uh, in the workforce, um, you'll always be whatever you can be. The only things that, you control are your attitude and effort. The results are going to be what they are. Uh, but it's our job to, I think, always just try and put our best effort forward. And then, this is what really, always came up, like when we're doing those practices with Coach Kennedy, and you know, I talked about all those great players that I had a chance to train with, and it became obvious. Like, you say you're working hard, but are you really working as hard as you can work? So those are the things that I would say. Just always give it your best, and make sure that you're being honest with yourself. Because if you have anything more to give, then you're just cheating yourself.
Wow.
Nice. That is absolutely true. And dude, I know I'm not wearing blue. It's purple. Okay, you just can't see because my light is not working right
It's
now. I don't
royal
know
purple. It's
You know,
Viking purple.
why.
I
Like,
got I got a question about the Vikings for you. On that team that you had with Randall and Randy and Chris Carter, who was the best athlete on that team? Who was this? I know it's a bunch of freaky athletes and awesome players, but who would you say was probably the best athlete out of all you?
Randy. And Randy was best athlete that I ever saw play. Um, and it was interesting. Growing up as a kid, 1984, Carl Lewis. Watching Carl Lewis running the Olympics, and then you remember Chris Sanders, who was a wide receiver for us. Chris
Yeah.
was also on our track team, ran the 100, ran the 4x1, and at one meet, Mount Sac relays, Chris got hurt, and they stuck me at anchor on 4x1. And I'm not a college 100 guy, right? Like, it's different.
mhm.
And Carl Lewis was on another team that we were racing. So I had a chance to be in a race with Carl Lewis. I got the baton 10 meters behind him, finished 20 behind him. So in 1998, when Randy got to the team,
Mhm.
I had already raced in the same race with Carl Lewis. I had been around guys like Joey Galloway, in the NFL, with Chris Carter, and seeing Jerry Rice on the field, Deion Sanders, Emmett Smith. And when Randy showed up at camp that morning, you hear a lot about guys, but just kind of seeing the fluidity, the ease in catching the ball, the speed, the acceleration, uh, the transition from stride into elevation, it was the most incredible thing I had ever seen. I remember my agent Neil called me up um, at lunch. We had the break in between practices, and he's like, "Hey, how did Randy look?" I was like, I'd never seen anything like this, right? I'd seen all these great athletes. I said, and it's not like I was making some great revelation,
Yeah.
but I said, if he stays healthy, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. They're different guys, right? Like, throughout your career, like, there are high school players, there are college players, there are NFL players, there are Pro Bowl players, there are all pro players, and then there are Hall of Famers. And you can see the difference in those guys. And Randy wasn't just a Hall of Fame kind of guy, he was a generational type player.
That's
What
awesome.
what was that like every day in practice between him and Chris Carter? Competing in drills that had to be something to watch.
I don't know, it was so much them competing. They're just out doing their thing. I'll tell you this. Quarterbacks need thick skin, need to be
Mhm.
great leaders,
Hmm.
especially with guys like Chris and Randy, because those two can talk. I mean, they talk a lot, and they got in the ears of quarterbacks a lot. And when you're younger and when you're a player, sometimes those things rub you the wrong way. Those guys just wanted to compete.
Mhm.
Like Chris, you know, forget Keyshawn Johnson, throw me the damn ball. Like Chris, yeah, throw me the damn ball every damn play, right? Like that's because he was a great player and he could do something with the football,
Mhm.
right? And yeah, I mean, you just get around guys like that that they just have it, and you hear the stories like about Michael Jordan, and a lot of guys wouldn't put him at the top of the list. Yeah, he's the kind of guy I want to hang out with based on how he treated me as a teammate. Some guys, they know how to win, and they expect certain things out of everybody, and they're not scared to tell you.
That's awesome. Okay, so Andre's gonna put you on the spot asking you this question: Who's the better receiver between Randy Moss and Chris Carter?
Wow.
Huh?
Well, I mean, Chris might be one of the best pass catchers and short space receivers, or tight space receivers of all time, right? But Randy, if you're talking about what makes a better player at the position, Randy just had more top end speed. Randy could change the complexion of a game, and he could just do things that Chris couldn't. Now, I think if I should clarify, there are things that Chris could do that Randy couldn't. I think the way that he was able to separate in certain situations, it's a different throw, right?
Mhm.
You're
Mm.
running a choice route from the Z, out of that slot position. Like Randy couldn't do that, but that's not what he was asked to do.
Sure.
Was asked to do, but I don't think he had the short space quickness and reactions and quick hands that Chris had. So Chris was better in certain things, but as an overall receiver, I would have to say Randy was a better receiver.
It's kind of funny because those two, from what I've seen in NFL rankings, are ranked behind Jerry Rice at like 2 and 3. So it's like, and that's actually like I always say this, like both of them were excellent. Like they could do things that one another couldn't do. So that's what made it super fun. But what was it like in the NFL, truthfully, during your time? What was it like?
Uh, like there are so many things that go into that answer, though. Like which part of it? I don't know which part of the answer to focus on.
Let's start with your rookie year.
Rookie year was tough for me because it was a difficult time for me to break in. As a starter, I played a couple of games and then tore my ACL. So it was tough emotionally. And then the next year, trying to come back off of I tore the ACL December 5th in Detroit, my rookie season. So, um, I wasn't 100% started training camp. So it kind of was like the almost the two full first years. As great as it was as a rookie, I scored my first touchdown on Monday Night Football at Soldier Field, right?
Wow.
So, like,
Ooh,
you get something like that as a high, but then as the low, you tear the ACL, and as a first round pick, uh, I was a disappointment as a first round pick. I didn't play the whole year. Didn't get the type of production that you want out of a first round player. Um, so it was frustrating, but at the same time, you learn a lot of lessons and look forward to coming back.
okay. So, how about when you became a veteran in the NFL? Like now you got more experience, you became better. How was that for you as well?
Yeah, I mean that's a it's an incredible time. Having a job where just the fact that you have that job means you're the very best in the world at something. It's hard to describe. How good that feels. Um, and having torn my ACL my rookie season, I tore my in my right knee, tore my PCL, MCL my fourth year, and then having four relatively healthy seasons. 4 straight 1,000-yard years. Like it's incredible to be able to overcome that and to be there and to prove. I wanted to prove Denny was right in selecting me in the first round. Having a chance to be at the pinnacle of the game. I left my last year was the only season I didn't miss any games. Still needed knee surgery after the year, but it was the only year I didn't miss any games. Led the NFC in rushing. We lost in the championship game for the second time in 3 years. Um, but that feeling of uh, being at the top of the game and the top of your game, there's nothing like it.
I mean, we were all shocked. I mean, a lot of people were shocked when you retired because they thought you had, a few more years left in you. But you said you. I remember you were saying about your health that you were leaving. You didn't want to put your health in jeopardy. Do you wish you would have stayed? Played another year? Or do you think, nah, I did the right thing?
No, I know I did the right thing. I was, again, it was the only season I didn't miss any games, and I still needed knee surgery after the year. I would have been like a 45-year-old knee replacement guy. Here I am 8 years after that, still haven't had a knee replacement. I feel really good. Like, um, I probably have had my last full speed run. My son's pretty young. He just finished his seventh grade year, but at the end of his fifth grade year, he wanted to race on the last day of school. So that's probably the last race I'll have. I avoided the popped Achilles all this time. I'm probably pressing my luck.
That's amazing. Sean, you got any other questions?
Um, yeah, I got. Can you give us one Corey Stringer story? I mean, a lot of us, a lot of these younger people didn't get to see him play. Us older people really miss him, and we don't, get to hear many stories about him.
Yeah, Big K is. He's the picture on my profile on Twitter. Um, Always will be. Um, just a special person, and that was my nickname for him. Raymond had nicknamed me Juice, and I don't know if Corey ever called me Robert. Like it was either Juice or it was Rupert, which was his way of joking around and saying Robert. When you say that if everybody likes you, then you're probably lying to somebody. Like that's probably the truth, right?
Mhm.
But with Big K, it was just different, right? Um, just changed every room that he was in for the better. Um, Always there, with a laugh and a smile and a joke. And, you know, as he called me Juice, my nickname, we would call him Big K or Special K or just Special for short.
Mhm.
And then as a player, just, seeing him come in as a freshman, Big Ten, playing right tackle, tearing it up, seeing him in the NFL. Uh, Funny story. I remember you talk about the Mayfield story. I remember uh, we were playing Green Bay, um, and oh shoot, what's his name? Uh, Defensive lineman. You know what I'm
Reggie
talking about?
White. Reggie
Red.
White.
Right.
I don't know why I was trying to think of the Reverend. So it was Reggie White lined up over Big K, and like he literally ran him over. Uh, and I remember because I had the protection on that side, like backup, right?
Mm,
And the only reason that Reggie didn't get a sack is because running over, like literally running over Corey,
slowed him down.
was the only. It slowed him down enough where I could slow him down just a touch more. Um, but after that, man, he just settled in and just an unbelievable player, but just a better person.
Thanks for that one. Okay, I don't got anything else. And thank you all to our chat. It's about time we get ready to sign off here. And I want to shout out our wrenches because you got a stupid troll out of the chat. So thank you very much for that, guys. Shout out to Tyler, Steely, Lacey, all our wrenches. Thank y'all for thank y'all for this. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in as well. It's been a great show. Robert Smith, thank you for coming on here, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. Go Bucks.
Go
Bucks.
Bucks.
It was I big fan since I was young and got to watch you play, man. It's been a privilege to interview you, and thanks again for agreeing to come on the show, man.
You
Appreciate
got
it.
it. Have a
Yeah,
good night, guys.
You too.
you too.
Thanks, Robert.